This episode is brought to you by Shopify. That's the sound of another sale on Shopify. The moment a business dream becomes reality. Shopify is the commerce platform revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. They simplify selling online and in person and provide 24/7 support so you can focus on successfully growing your business. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/offer22, all lowercase.
Here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. Sports stadiums here in the city are a quintessential part of our history. And by and large, I think we've done a pretty good job of celebrating even the ones that aren't here anymore. Looking at you, Civic Arena, Forbes Field, and even the Three Rivers Stadium. Gone, but not forgotten, am I right? So with baseball season just a day away, we wanted to try to celebrate one that's still fighting for an important recognition. CityCast's Morgan Moody talked to writer and historian David Rottenstein about a special spot in the Hill District. It's Wednesday, March 28th. I'm Megan Harris, and this is CityCast Pittsburgh.
So what were sports kind of like during the 1920s? Like, are people packing these, I guess, kind of makeshift stadiums? I'm sure they're, not like the stadiums that we see now, like PNC Park. And was Pittsburgh, was it a big sports town then to even support this kind of venture?
Absolutely. Pittsburgh, for much of its history, has always been a big sports town. At this time, we're talking about there were professional sports stadiums, more formal architect design, professionally built facilities like Exposition Park. And then in these small sandlots, baseball teams formed, football teams formed. And many of the teams that developed in this amateur world were based in the workplace. So we had this very complicated, very robust amateur sports environment that grew up alongside a more professional sporting environment with baseball teams and later football teams, boxers, and then even later on basketball. Mm-hmm. But this time was very rich in professional sports history. And it's the time when some of the best known figures in Pittsburgh sports history got their start. Art Rooney, for example, who founded the Steelers, had his own baseball and football teams that played throughout the North Side and Pittsburgh at this time.
And like the Rooneys, this story, is about a stadium, but it's also really about the Williams family, the Williams brothers. How did these three brothers from Barbados, these Bayesian brothers who immigrated to Pittsburgh, end up owning businesses in the early 1900s?
Each of the brothers began working for other businesses. They worked as Pullman porters. One of them, according to census data, worked as a photo engraver. And they were able to save up enough money to go into business for themselves in 1914 by opening up a basement billiard hall in the Hill District on Fullerton Street. Mm-hmm. So for about 6 years, these brothers worked together in the billiard hall, pooling their money. And at some point, one of them, I suspect it was the oldest brother, Alexander McDonald Williams, came up with the idea to rent a couple of lots at the intersection of Chauncey Street, Humber Way, Hallett, and Junilla. Mm. And the lot itself had been vacant since the end of the Civil War. It had been owned by these two families that, for whatever reason, had never decided to build anything on it.
Why did they get into it, though? Like, why sports?
It was a way to make money. It was something that I think that they were introduced to by Alexander McDonald Williams' brother-in-law, Arliss Bailey. And, it was a path to what they hoped would be easy money. But they hit some roadblocks along the way. You need some money management skills. You need some sports management skills. You need some social networking skills. And everything has to come together just right. And initially, they had a good thing running. Mm. They opened up in the early summer of 1920 and began hosting Negro Leagues baseball games, boxing matches, concerts, community festivals. And almost immediately, they started encountering money problems. And to deal with these money problems, Alexander, the oldest brother, began mortgaging his properties and taking out loans.
You talked about the Negro League teams that played there, but what about Gus Greenlee? Because Pittsburgh knows him as kind of the big wig behind, the local success of Negro League teams like the Crawford Reds and the Homestead Grays. He's also known as the first Black stadium owner. So why did Gus get the credit and not Alexander?
So Gus Greenlee was an outsized character, almost a living legend in Pittsburgh history. And in 1920, Gus Greenlee was, just out of World War I, and he was making a living as a bootlegger. He didn't have the wealth and the reputation that he gained in the later 1920s and 1930s. So, at this point in time, the Williams brothers and their counterparts were really the precursors to what Gus Greenlee built up in the Hill District. Greenlee got into sports promotion, management, and then into the Negro Leagues in the 1930s. His ballpark on Bedford was built in 1932, a full dozen years after the Williams brothers built the Central Amusement Park. So, the Williams brothers were a brief flash in the historical pan here in Pittsburgh. Gus Greenlee, on the other hand, was an enduring figure. He built a tremendous entertainment empire with his restaurants and nightclubs in the Hill District, especially on Wiley Avenue. So Gus Greenlee really became much better known and was a much more enduring figure than the Williams brothers. That's why historians, when they started writing about Black baseball stadiums, latched on to Gus Greenlee's highly visible Greenlee Field, which was also designed by architect Louis Bellinger as the first Black-owned and Black-operated professional sports stadium. But as historians who came along later have found, that, number one, Greenlee Field wasn't the first Black professional sports stadium, and it wasn't even Black-owned or Black-operated because Greenlee was in close partnership with the Tito boys, Joe Tito and his brothers, who actually provided a significant amount of capital to Greenlee to purchase the Pittsburgh Crawfords and to build and operate Greenlee Field.
I've never been great at sewing crafts, sorry Granny, but there's a resource here in Pittsburgh that makes all things sewing so much easier for beginners like me. Firecracker Fabrics is your friendly neighborhood sewing shop connected to Cut and Sew Studio in Morningside. Firecracker Fabrics specializes in mindfully sourced, small batch notions and natural fiber fabrics, even indie patterns and general tools, and you'll love their space. Firecracker Fabrics' mission is to foster a safe and inclusive environment for all shapes, genders, and ages, creating in the sewing world. You can shop their full inventory in-store or online at firecrackerfabrics.com. Or buy for your friends. They offer nationwide shipping and local pickup options. So stop in person, or check them out on Instagram for new products and easy-to-follow tutorials. That's at Firecracker Fabrics and firecrackerfabrics.com.
Based on the true story that shocked the world. Critics are calling A Spy Among Friends on MGM Plus a thrilling new Cold War drama.
Treason. That's what I'm accusing you of.
With spellbinding performances.
I am not a traitor!
Starring Emmy Award winners Damian Lewis and Guy Pearce.
You're trying to get me killed. Give me one reason why not.
Are you lonesome?
A Spy Among Friends. Watch now, only on MGM Plus.
So Alexander kind of laid the framework or the groundwork really for Gus Greenlee. His son applied for a historical designation but was denied in 2011. He died 8 years later in 2019. My great-grandfather, Willis Moody, his name is honored on the Homestead Grays Bridge.
Okay.
Yeah, he played in the Negro League. So I get, that it means a lot for, your family contributions to be acknowledged by a state that wasn't acknowledging and wasn't really letting Black people thrive at that time. Has the family said if there has been any, new motion forward to at least get a sign honoring the site?
So Alexander McDonald Williams' son, McDonald Williams, took his name from his father's middle name, grew up in Pittsburgh, attended the University of Pittsburgh, went on to get a PhD in English, and became a highly respected professor of English literature. As he was getting older, my understanding of the story is McDonald Williams wanted to get recognition for his father's contributions to Pittsburgh history and to baseball history. So he began doing research into his father's ballpark, and he collaborated with Pittsburgh-based scholars to put together what he thought would be a good, solid application for a historical marker to commemorate his father's contributions. And in 2011, he put together this application package to the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission, asking for the commission, which oversees historical markers in the Commonwealth, to put a marker at the Central Amusement Park site. And the agency reviewed his application and denied it. They said that based on the information they were given, that the ballpark and the people weren't historically significant enough to warrant a historical marker. And they cited the newly placed one at Greenleaf Field as evidence that there was something in their minds more significant.
I don't understand how it's, if there's all of this information behind it, that it actually is the first, Black-owned, Black-operated, maybe the only, compared to Gus Greenlee's stadium, that why it doesn't have that recognition.
So there are a few things going on with the application that McDonald Williams put together. First of all, he wasn't a professional historian. But on the other hand, the people at the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission should have realized that they had an opportunity to go back to Dr. Williams and collaborate with him to get more information. Mm-hmm. So what happened is the PHMC, Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission, basically was incurious. They simply saw what they evaluated as an inadequate application for a historical marker. They denied it and didn't pursue any follow-up. I asked for the records related to that decision that they made, and initially the agency said that they couldn't release them. So it took a while to cobble together the full application. They tossed Dr. Williams' application. They held onto it for a decade and then, threw it away. So putting together the original application from the Williams family and from the scholars that Dr. Williams collaborated with, it was possible to get an understanding of what the state had available to it. And then I asked the head of the agency, the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, some questions by email. And basically, she reiterated the agency's document retention policy and then answered my question about did the agency pursue any additional research after receiving the application. And she said no. Mm-hmm. As a historian, that's what I do for a living. I find it truly disappointing that an agency filled with professional historians is so incurious about the people submitting information to it. Mm-hmm. I can't get into the minds of the folks at the agency, but certainly racial bias plays a big part in what ends up getting preserved. The Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission has a body called the Historic Preservation Board, and the last photograph that they published of the board, I believe it was 2 years ago, it was an all-white body. So there's absolutely no racial diversity in the group of people who makes many of the decisions about historic preservation in the Commonwealth.
So the family was denied in 2011. Are they going to try again to get a new application going to honor the site?
So McDonald Williams' daughter, Donna Williams, who now lives in Atlanta, is very interested in trying to take another bite at getting a historical marker erected at the site. And she's been working with baseball historians and people interested in getting the story more widely known. So after After her father failed at getting the historical marker put up, several baseball historians wrote about the Central Amusement Park and about the PHMC's denial. Their articles appeared in academic journals and in baseball history blogs. So she is very interested in ensuring that the story is told and that the bad history contained in the Greenlee marker field is corrected.
David Rotenstein is a historian and a writer. Thank you so much for talking to us. It's always interesting and informative.
Well, thank you for having me.
A little news before you go, and we'll keep it on theme. The Pirates crack a fresh bat tomorrow. Our Buccos are going to be in Cincinnati, taking on the Reds, but don't worry, the home opener is still a week away. I'm really looking forward to what will most definitely be a proper crushing by the Boston Red Sox here at home. And hey, at least Kutch is back. And the city is finally moving, maybe, on its huge list of tax-exempt properties. Mayor Gainey's administration announced the first batch yesterday, a list of 26 properties, including UPMC, Pitt, CMU, Allegheny Health Network, even Propel Schools, plus a bunch of, quote, private citizens. I had no idea until I read WESA's story that honorably discharged veterans can own tax-free property here in Pennsylvania. Shout out to reporter Kylie Kosinski for always serving these teachable moments. Anyway, if the city is successful on just these first 26 challenges, it would be worth $3.5 million in annual taxes. That's it for our show today. If you want to keep up with everything Pittsburgh, definitely sign up for our Hey Pittsburgh newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from around the city. Talk to you then.
I should be as creative as I want, and I still wore black. I'm no Billy Porter.